want to thank all of you for testifying. I particularly want to thank the chairman for his focus on rural America, because quite frankly, we're in need of some attention. And I am sure that many of the folks on this committee, if not all of you, saw Chairman Pai's announcement yesterday on 5G in rural America. $9 billion to build 5G infrastructure in rural America. Sounds marvelous. However, I continue to be frustrated in this process. Folks in Montana, rural Montana and rural parts of this country have waited years and years for the mobility fund, phase 2 money to get out the door, and it, as you well know, never happened. In 2019, we waited for most of the year for the FCC to investigate issues around the mapping for the mobility fund. After a year, we learned what we already knew, and that was that the maps were a joke. So another year has gone by with zero progress for wireless infrastructure in rural America. As many of you pointed out, a couple of you certainly directly pointed that we can't wait on this kind of stuff. And another year where Washington bureaucracy and gridlock here in this body is shortchanging rural America. So while and I believe everybody supports Chairman Pai's good intentions to spend $9 billion in rural America, I've got some serious concerns about their ability to execute, because I haven't seen it happen. And that's why I would say to you, and I know Chairman Wicker is not here, but we need an oversight hearing on it. I believe that Chairman Pai is in front of the House as we speak. And I think it's important that we also get that bipartisan mapping bill out. I know this committee has sent it out. It needs to get out of the Senate and move on, because rural America deserves better. The divide is growing. Let me give you a real-life experience that happened to me a week ago yesterday. Some hay was to be delivered by a trucking company out of South Dakota, as a matter of fact, called me up. We give them 2 numbers. We give them the cell number, because when I'm on the farm, cell doesn't work too good, and we give them the landline number, because when I'm, of course, off the farm, we need to have the cell phone. They called me up, said, want to load up a semi-load of hay. Great. Froze the night before. We had no snow. Perfect. I'm there on the farm. We can load it up. We didn't get the call. They called the cell number on the farm. Now, I don't know why. I don't know if it was the time of year. I don't know if it was because the moon was in the wrong spot. I don't know if it was because my pickup was parked in the wrong spot in the yard. But I don't get calls seldom when I'm on the farm. We happened to be going to town to get some Thanksgiving goodies, and picked up the message an hour and a half after they dropped it off. I called them up, and of course they had a load from somewhere else, and I lost that opportunity to market. That's the kind of disadvantage we're put into in rural America. So my question, you guys know that. I mean, you know that. I mean, you know things aren't exactly cherry in rural America when it comes to 5G. So there's a potential to get some money from this public auction. But what else do we need to do to make sure that this is a priority? I've heard all of you speak about it in some form or another. And I agree with Jonathan Adelstein when he said, infrastructure, without infrastructure, spectrum is just theoretical, and that's a fact. If we don't do something with it, it ain't going to happen. And all those advantages that we get with it are history. So could you just very briefly tell me, if you were in my shoes, in one sentence, what would you do? Who wants to go first? Mayor? And if you'd say we've already done enough, go ahead. I wouldn't agree with that, but go ahead.
Well, your story rings true, and you know, you're preaching to the choir. But I'll give you my story, and then was I tried to get a lift on the way over here, and I couldn't get a connection from 4 blocks away because of the buildings, and I ended up flagging down a guy who gave me a lift, or I would have been late. And so similar story, but on a very different situation. But I hear the stories like you're talking about with rural challenges all the time.
Yeah.
I think that's why.
Because we don't have 4G, 3G, 2G, 1G, we got
Right.
no G.
I think that's why I'm kind of bullish on the fixed wireless solutions that the C-band would allow, because that will improve some of those rural wireless access issues.
But there has to be money involved. The Schatz already pointed out, the cost flow doesn't happen yet. It may never happen. I mean, we had an REA set up because the companies would not electrify rural America, so we set up a program to do that. Mr. Bergman.
So thank you, Senator. And I was encouraged to see earlier this week one of our member companies turned up their 5G network, and it extends into Montana. So we'll be excited to see that. But to your point, I think there's no doubt that there's a need for support in the most challenging parts of the country. And so one of the things we'd love to talk to you all about is whether you could work to make a portion of the 6 gigahertz band available for licensed services and use a portion of those proceeds to fund the kind of rural dividend that you're talking about. We're certainly supportive of the efforts that the FCC announced yesterday, and agree with you, would like to see it move faster rather than slower.
Yeah. Next, anybody else want to comment on it? Go ahead, Mr.
Well, I spent a long time running the successor agency to the REA, the Rural Utility Service, and I think you do need subsidies. I think the market breaks down when it comes to rural America, and because of the interest in the broader economy of having rural America connected, we need to provide adequate resources to make up for that difference, but to do it efficiently. The loan grant combination, there's a great example of what we did in the New Yorker, just ran last night. I'd ask that we put that in the record, an article about what happened in Kentucky to a small town that was dying off, but got broadband grant loan from RUS, and now the community is booming with all kinds of the jobs that Mayor Tenhagen was talking about. So we do need that support. What the FCC is doing, I think, is great with the USF fund.
I just, real quick, and I know I'm over time, the point you just made about those rural communities, there are so many negatives that impact rural America right now. I think the positive one that's out there is broadband connectivity, high-speed internet. And if you get that, that means you don't have to live in New York City. Not that New York City is a bad place, but I sure hell want to live in South Dakota or Montana before I'd want to live in New York City. It gives you that ability to do business anywhere. Thank you.
Yeah.